The Balkans wars of the 1990s were among the bloodiest of the late 20th century and coined a chilling phrase in modern conflict, ethnic cleansing. Now there's talk of separating parts of that region once again on religious and racial grounds. What will it take to end the tensions? Welcome to Roundtable with me, David Foster. Kosovo split from Serbia in the 1990s, but there are still Serbs and Kosovo Albanians within Kosovo who feel territorially isolated, living alongside what they might call the wrong ethnic neighbours. The two countries are now talking about a land swap, but there are concerns that this could reignite tensions across the Balkans.
The border between Kosovo and Serbia has long been contested. Since the end of the Kosovo War in 1999 to its declaration of independence in 2008, debate has surrounded its position as a separate country. But its leaders are considering a land swap to solidify its borders. Is the idea risking a return to the Balkans' deadly past? The separation of Kosovo from Serbia was the last disputed territory in the breakup of Yugoslavia in the 1990s. Before that, the whole region saw bloody wars based on ethnic divisions. Today, the Western Balkans is a mostly peaceful region made up of Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, and Macedonia. Kosovo, in theory, is the youngest member of that group after the mostly Albanian province split from the mostly Serb population of Serbia. But each side of the border isn't 100% ethnic Albanian or 100% Serb. There are still pockets of communities on each side. The proposal would move the border to firm up a stronger ethnic division. Kosovo's president says it would prevent divisions within Kosovo itself.
Korrigjimi i kufive eviton definitivisht ndarjen e Kosovës, shkëmbimin e territoreve, eviton krizat, problemet apo eventualisht luftrat e reja, eviton problemet ndëretnike, eviton përpjekjen për krijim të një autonomie të modelit Srpska Republik.
But does a border swap based on ethnic division set a dangerous precedent for other countries? The Balkans has a dark history of ethnic cleansing. The movement of any borders in the region has long been discouraged by the international community.
For us, what counts is stability in the region, in the whole region. And we should keep in mind that any kind of bilateral agreement should not endanger the overall stability in the region, but the other way around should contribute to more stability.
But the United States appears to be supporting an amendment to the Kosovo-Serbia border, and some high-level officials within the European Union have also signalled they may accept an agreement. For decades, Serbia has refused to accept Kosovo as a country. Russia, China, and a handful of EU countries don't recognise its independence either. Could the move finally firm up the last shattered piece of what was Yugoslavia? Or will it be the beginning of new cracks across the whole of the Western Balkans? The Yugoslav wars, which led to the independent countries of today, took years to finalise and cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Will a new Kosovo-Serbia border risk the region going back to its bloody past, or is it the final piece needed for stability?
Well, I'm very pleased to say that joining us on Skype from Pristina in Kosovo, we have Bekim, Collaku, Chief of Staff to the President of the Republic of Kosovo. From Belgrade in Serbia, Boris Tadic is with us, Serbia's President from 2004 to 2012. And with me in the studio, Charles Crawford, Britain's Ambassador to Bosnia from 96 to 98, and Serbia 2001 to 2003, making up the numbers in more ways than one. James Ker-Lindsay, Senior Research Fellow on Balkans Politics at the London School of Economics. Very good to have you all with us. Mr. President, Boris Tadic, let me come to you first of all. What do you make of this idea of the land swap?
The idea of the land swap is very difficult and bringing all of us in a challenging time. I am not sure that people in other countries in the region are very happy after having that idea in their mind. But also regarding Serbia, I'm not sure this is a really idea which current President Vučić is sharing with his partners. Frankly speaking, we don't know what is really planned, and we are hearing only rumors about possible plans. We are having delegations from United States and European Union countries, and this is not crystal clear what is behind of new steps and new efforts regarding solution on Kosovo.
What do you make of the open letter that was written to the EU Foreign Affairs Minister Federica Mogherini by 3 former high representatives of Bosnia, among them the UK's Paddy Ashdown, Carl Bildt of Sweden, that said, and I'll quote this to you, they can think of no policy, this land swap, more likely to lead us back to division and conflict in the Balkans?
Okay, that letter is written by the former international representatives in the region, and they are sharing ideas that were the main ideas in the period of 1990s and the beginning of 21st century. They are following agenda that was established in that time, and this is a legitimate. But at the same time, Federica Mogherini is in charge to find a solution for current situation, and she cannot be strictly connected with the agenda, with the policy which was established in 1990s. But at the same time, I have a real concerns about also this letter, because this letter is not taking into consideration the fact that unilateral declaration of independence of Pristina or Kosovo is also the act of changing borders. And we are all together in a very difficult situation, because that was, from my point of view, opening of Pandora box, with the implication not only on Balkans, but also elsewhere, Ukraine, for example, and other regions all around the world. This is why I'm taking this letter very seriously, because that letter is showing attitude of the former representatives of international community, European Union, mainly on the Balkans. But at the same time, I think that Federica Mogherini has a right to find solution in the new situation.
Okay, Mr. Collaku, in Pristina, I don't want to go back over the history of the establishment of the Republic of Kosovo, if we can avoid that at the moment, and deal with the present time. That quote, no conflict, no policy more likely to lead us back to conflict. And yet this is something that you and your president are backing.
Absolutely not. I mean, we cannot even think or imagining that we are working towards creating any kind of instability in the region. Completely on the contrary, the whole point of these difficult talks is to end the last remaining source of the conflict in the Western Balkans. And that's why all the stakeholders involved are supporting strongly both parties and are not excluding any option for the sake of reaching a mutual peaceful settlement for both Kosovo and Serbia. And as I said, the only way forward is reaching a deal, a peaceful deal. And going on now on limiting the options or setting the red lines doesn't help the parties to reach a deal.
Look, I know you can't speak for the president of Serbia, but your president was with him in Brussels not so very long ago, less than a week ago, and refused to meet when the international community was expecting perhaps some announcement about the land swap deal. If they don't even meet face to face, how can you take this forward?
No, it depends how you take it. This is not the first time that the two presidents have gone in Brussels for the talks and not meeting directly with each other. It is the mediator, Federica Mogherini, that decides, when they meet and how they meet. And this time, as you know, there were tensions in Kosovo, there were tensions in Serbia, and probably the mediator didn't see it as adequate, to have the both presidents meeting just for the sake of meeting. We want to meet when we know that we can make progress forward, but we are not meeting just to send pictures around the world.
Okay, we will get on to the broader picture of the Balkans per se in a little while, if we may. But let's take two interested observers, if I can call you that, rather than two people directly involved in the politics there. Former ambassador Charles, what do you make of the position we're at the moment? Because the suggestion that it could lead to further conflict, reignite passions in there, is a very dangerous one.
Well, it is dangerous, but you know, where do you start? I mean, this is a region where everyone likes to start with history. And I suppose if you go back at least 100 years, for most of the period in the last 100 years, we had a thing called Yugoslavia, which kept these issues under some sort of framework. That then broke up, and we had the tensions we've had and the terrible mess in the 1990s. And so we're now still trying to find what you might call a self-sustaining outcome. And I think the problem with the Kosovo situation, you know, in a way I agree with President Tadic, is that the way it was done has not led to a self-sustaining positive outcome supported by the planet. If you've got a situation where some countries support Kosovo as an independent state, but some EU countries and Russia, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, you know, Indonesia, Spain, Romania don't, this is a major mess, and it creates a sort of existential tension, which itself leads to the risk of...
Existential to the Balkans, perhaps?
Well, but also, you know, it sets a precedent for other divisions, Chechnya and Ukraine and so on. So, you know, so these things have implications beyond the immediate problem.
So they have to deal with the reality of the world as it is at the moment.
But it's always a good place to start.
Yes, okay, well, except you said everybody goes back, looks back at history.
No, but the reality, history is part of the reality. And so if you're looking at where you would identify borders in the former Yugoslavia, which are going to have, if you like, a natural legitimacy for the people living there. There were three ways to do this when Yugoslavia broke up. One was to say we will have all the borders of the internal republics. Another way was to say we'll negotiate all the borders. Have a big conference, it'll last 10 years and we'll do that. The other thing you could have done was to say, well, we'll not negotiate these borders because they make sense, but we'll negotiate those borders. What we decided to do was stick with all the internal borders, and that led to wars.
So do you think it makes perfect sense in that case to say to some of the Serbs who live on the border with Serbia but are in Kosovo, tomorrow you will wake up and you will be part of Kosovo, equally to those Kosovar Albanians, that they would actually sort of, even though they're on the border, they would...
Well, I wouldn't put it that way. I wouldn't put it that way, saying you're going to wake up tomorrow and your country has moved around you.
But that is the reality of it, though.
Well, no, the reality is you could have a deal which might involve them having a say in how that would work, and would you have, you know, how that would be done would be very complicated. But that's not the problem. The problem is, how do you stop the Bosnian Serbs saying, well, if the Albanians can...
This is where I want to get a little bit later.
Join Albania, why can't the Serbs join Serbia? That's the problem.
James, can I just put to you a second quote from that open letter to Federica Mogherini, which says, sustainable peace can only come when we learn to live in multi-ethnic communities rather than redrawing borders to create mono-ethnic ones. And that is one of the problems here, isn't it? It's going back to the future.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt this is an extremely controversial idea that's been put on the table. But let's also sort of bear in mind, there's two things. One, we don't know at the moment exactly what is being proposed. This is all very much in the realm of speculation. But also, there is an outstanding problem that we've got in the Balkans. In fact, you know, those of us who work on it say there are three key issues that need to be resolved if you want to put the past behind. That is the Macedonian name issue, and that hopefully we will see resolved in the course of this year. The second is the relationship between Serbia and Kosovo, and the third is Bosnia. There's a very good chance, as we're talking about now, of resolving first two of those, so the Macedonian name issue and Kosovo and Serbia. And I think this would be a tremendous step forward for peace in the region. And so I think in many ways we should be welcoming this. And, you know, there's a lot of attention that's been put onto the question of borders and what this means. I've heard a lot of people say that this is very un-European to talk about shifting borders. But of course, we're talking to you here from the United Kingdom, where the great achievement of the 1990s in many ways in terms of peace deals in Europe was the Good Friday Agreement, and that is predicated on a change of border, that the British border will change and Northern Ireland will become a part of Ireland if that is the will of the people. And I think this is very often forgotten. I mean, you know, there is a very specific regional context we talk about in the Balkans, but I think luckily we are also seeing a lot of pragmatism, that this is a real opportunity, and both Kosovo and Serbia need this for their different reasons. Kosovo needs to join the UN, and Serbia and Kosovo need to join the European Union, and whatever the two sides can reach, you know, I think needs to be welcomed.
Can I ask you two, as the outside experts, if you wish to put a question or a point to either of our two guests, then please do so.
Well, I've got a question for them.
Turn around.
Turn around.
And say to whom it is.
Baš mi je drago, Mr. President. I can't say that in Albanian, I'm afraid. My question is the following. If a Serbian president and a Kosovo president agree a land swap, can they be sure they will not be assassinated by extreme nationalists in their own countries?
Mr. President first.
My problem with that question is the fact that I cannot say that current Serbian president is not nationalist. He's coming from that political family, and I remember very well when we started to talk about technical solutions of Kosovo that he and his party was threatening us to kill us and calling us as a traitor because we were trying to find sustainable solution. But nowadays he's changing his rhetorics, and frankly speaking, I don't know what is the line behind of these rhetorics, which kind of interest. But answer on that simple question is that Vučić don't have radicals that are going to threat him because he was radical, organizing radicals against us when we were trying to find sustainable solution. But I don't know, is swapping territory is a sustainable solution. That solution is first of all violating Serbian constitution. That means that Serbia firstly has to recognize Kosovo independence, and after that to swap land. This is not sustainable from my point of view, and this is not in accordance with our law. But I'm not talking only about that. I'm talking about sustainability. Whatever is going to be solution has to be sustainable solution. Solution which is not humiliating one partner, Serbs or Albanians.
Let me come to Bekim in Pristina and rephrase that to some extent, that no matter what happens, if there is a land swap, it's going to cause an awful lot of aggravation to a lot of people.
Let me clarify one thing. We are not talking about land swap. We are talking about peaceful border correction as a potential option under which Serbia may be willing to recognize Kosovo. You need to bear in mind one thing. Kosovo is ready to accept a deal, a final deal, only under the circumstances, only under the scenario under which Serbia de facto and de jure recognizes Kosovo. This is the starting point and the end point for Kosovo. Why we are doing this, it's very clear, you know. Without recognition from Serbia, we don't think that we can break the current deadlock in which Kosovo remains.
But may I say to you this, just to get back to the question that I put to you, that if there is an increase in tensions in Kosovo as a result of this, even if it's perhaps only in the short term, that would be a dangerous thing, not just for the Kosovars there and the Serbians there, but also for the Balkans as a whole.
The main thing of the deal is to have a deal that can be implemented in both countries. So Kosovo nor Serbia won't sign any deal which would not be able to be implemented in the both countries. But you need to bear in mind another thing. As long as the deal is bad for nationalists, both in Kosovo and Serbia, this definitely will be a good deal.
James, come in on those points, and then as we were trying to do towards the end of that, broaden it out to the region as a whole.
Well, I think, you know, again, I return to the point that, you know, we've reached a stalemate effectively between Kosovo and Serbia over the past 10 years. And it's quite clear that there is now an independent Kosovo. There's no going back to this. There's no reincorporating into Serbia. But at the same time, Serbia has also played out a stalemate, if you like, on the world stage, as was pointed out. Kosovo isn't a member of the United Nations, and there's no immediate prospect of that happening. At the same time, we have 5 countries in the European Union which haven't shown any indication over 10 years that they're going to change their position on Kosovo independence. And so Kosovo can't join the European Union, it can't join NATO. And so something has got to give. There's got to be some sort of agreement.
Well, I sort of get that, but I'm trying to sort of broaden it out to the region as a whole. But because it didn't take very much initially.
But the thing is,
spark one of the worst wars that we've seen in a very, very long time. I mean, and the danger is that talk of secession, whatever you want to call it, talk of moving this, that, and the other way. You said it was rather like the British saying we're going to give you the White Cliffs of Dover or Stratford-on-Avon or Canterbury Cathedral.
To the French.
To the French. These things matter, and they can cause an awful lot of aggro. How is that to be avoided?
Well, look, I mean, I could give you all chapter and verse under international law how, in actual fact, for all sorts of reasons, the simplest, easiest outcome of this would be, easy is obviously a relative term, is for Serbia to accept Kosovo's independence. Because overnight, a whole bunch of issues are resolved in terms of Kosovo's status on the world stage.
Other than the issue of the Serbs in Bosnia saying that we want independence as well.
That
Bosnian
actually,
Serbs.
funnily enough, if you come at it from a people would say, oh, but it's not just about legality. But that actually is incredibly important in a lot of these debates. If you sort out Kosovo and Serbia, whatever Serbia and Kosovo choose to decide between themselves has absolutely no legal implications for Republika Srpska. The position of the international community has been the borders of Bosnia settled. That's recognised by UN Security Council resolutions. It's been reaffirmed by the International Court of Justice. If 2 sovereign states, Serbia and Kosovo, choose that they want to adjust their borders, that is perfectly in line with international law.
Well, I can see it from a legal point of view, but I can't see it from a populist point of view.
Well, if that was the case, if we're going to be really blunt, and this is a point that a number of people have made, then where were these concerns 10 years ago? Because, it was very controversial, Kosovo's declaration of independence. There were a lot of commentators at the time saying this is going to have a massive knock-on effect, not just in the Balkans, but worldwide. And what's actually happened is that everyone has held the fence on this one and said, no, what happens there? The Western argument was it was a unique case and stuck very closely to it.
This may come back to Charles's point that now we have to live in the modern world, which has China and Russia becoming more influential in this.
Well, they were influential then. I mean, I said to the Foreign Office at the time, if you go down this path, you are unlikely to succeed because Putin and the Chinese will not agree with you, and I was ignored.
So let me go to Boris Tadic, former president of Serbia, and ask you this, the same question phrased slightly differently. If this land swap, call it whatever you want, this rearrangement of the borders between Kosovo and Serbia goes ahead, Republika Srpska, people in Republika Srpska in Bosnia are going to say, well, if that can happen there, we want something similar for us. And that's a cauldron. It's going to bubble, it's going to boil, and it could overflow.
This is not only about Republika Srpska. I mean, I'm afraid that every precedent in the international politics is opening Pandora box. I mean, what happened after unilateral declaration of independence on Kosovo? Crimea issue. Crimea issue is a simple outcome of unilateral declaration of independence in international arena. Justification of that issue was very simple. If it was possible on Kosovo, this is possible on Crimea at the same time. I was always against a partition of Bosnia and Herzegovina because this is bringing instability, immediately instability in the region, a very dangerous situation with Islamic terrorism, which is very well known after Arab Springs. And this is why we have to take into consideration one solution in the context of Balkan peace, Balkan prosperity, but not only Balkan, but global prosperity.
With just a couple of minutes to go, I'm going to move it back to Pristina and Bekim Collaku. How do you prevent this becoming a wider issue? How do you keep a lid on it?
All these concerns, to some extent, are legitimate ones, but they are extremely exaggerated because we are talking about peaceful solution and fully in line with the international law. So we are not talking about setting any kind of precedent. And if someone wants to refer this as a precedent, then it can be referred only as a positive precedent, because if two independent countries agree on a border change or border correction, then this should be the best example for any dispute between other countries, because they need to know that in the future, if they want to address their own disputes, they can do it only in a peaceful manner. Let me also address the other argument against this deal, the argument of the ethnic division. This doesn't stand at all. Everybody knows that 2/3 of the Serbs live in the south of Kosovo. And if it's going to be a border correction, it cannot be among ethnic lines, even if the two sides, if the two parties want to happen that, which is not the case. So there is no division among ethnic lines, and there is no negative precedent for any other country in the region.
Well, thank you very much indeed from Pristina. Thank you from Belgrade, former president of Serbia there, and to my two guests in the studio. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, the one thing, it's a very complicated situation, but the one thing that everybody wishes not to happen is a return to the bloodshed and the conflict of the 1990s across the Balkans. You've been watching Roundtable with me, David Foster. Thank you for your company. Hope you can join us next time. Bye-bye.